In the current video, I tried solving previous year question papers of IGNOU MA Education. As you know, there are 6 papers. Out of that, this one is 016 Educational Research. I tried solving papers from 2016 onwards. As you all know, you have to answer 3 600 words questions and 4 150 words questions. Out of 6 150 words question given, you have to answer only 4 150 words questions. Like that, 600 words, you will get 2 questions they will give us first, and out of that you have to choose one. Second question also you will get 2 600 mark questions, out of that one you have to choose. And last question, that is the fourth one, that there also you will get 2 600 words questions, out of that you have to answer one. So that out of 2 you have to choose one. So total of 6 600 words questions, out of that you have to write 3. First question we addressed here is from December 2016 question paper, and the question is, what are the steps of scientific method? Explain. Then critically analyze its scope in conducting educational research. So first of all, we will see what is scientific methods and what are its steps, and then later on, as a second part, we will do an analysis on the scope of this scientific method in conducting educational research. Scientific method is the process of testing and experimentation, that we are doing it very objectively or in a systematic way. So the basic process involved here is we are observing something in the universe and we are forming a hypothesis on that, then making a prediction. Then afterwards we are conducting an experiment, and finally we analyze the result or we analyze that observation. Or in other words, we can say scientific method is a process with the help of which scientists try to investigate, verify or construct an accurate and reliable version of any natural phenomena. Here, a researcher make an objective framework in order to do a scientific inquiry during his experimental work. So let us see what is the aim of scientific method. Aim of the scientific method is to analyze the observation made at the beginning. We are observing something and we are analyzing that. That is the aim of the scientific method. There are different steps for a scientific method, and we can skip some steps or we can add on some steps based on the types of research we are doing. Okay, so let us see what are the different steps of scientific method. Step 1, that is observation and formulation of questions. If any field, whichever field we are selecting in order to do the research, we are selecting a particular field. From the specific field, we will make our own observation and then we are formulating a question. This is the first steps. An observation has to be made into any observable phenomena in the universe. That is the first step of scientific method. For example, we can ask questions like why the sky is black at night, or what is the difference in the effect of organic fertilizer and artificial fertilizer on the growth of pea plant. Such questions we can ask. Second step is formulation of research hypothesis. Hypothesis, we are making it based on some existing theory. There may be some questions or maybe some statements, we are making it based on the existing theory. So formulation of research hypothesis based on already existing theory is the second steps. Research hypothesis is the statement of possible relationship between 2 or more variables. What are variables? We can see when we see the plant growth, there are so many factors that affect the growth of the plant. For example, sunlight, water, the type of soil and type of fertilizer we are using. All these are the variables. Okay, so whenever there are some relationship exists between the variable, so whenever we are making the research hypothesis, there we can state the relationship between these variable. That is the second step, that is formulation of hypothesis. How can we define hypothesis? It is an idea that is suggested as the possible explanation for something but has not yet been found to be true or correct. But no one is proved it is correct. So that is called a hypothesis. The next slide, we will see an example for research hypothesis. There is a significant difference between the effect of organic and artificial fertilizers on the growth of pea plant. That we are taking it as an example, that is the what way it affects the growth of pea plant. So that this is our hypothesis here. Okay, so whenever I am explaining it with an example, it will be much clearer. So that I took an example from the science field because I am a science teacher. Then the next step, the steps 3 is the researcher describe the procedure. Here researcher is describing what sort of experiment he is conducting, how many plots he is selecting, which type of seeds he is selecting, and then which are the other variables he is keeping it as constant. For example, the growth of the plant is affected by the sunlight, the availability of water, and type of soil, etc. Isn't it? So all these variables that experimenter is going to keep it as constant, whereas he is changing only the type of fertilizer. In one plot he is using the artificial fertilizer, and in the other plot he is using the organic fertilizer, and then he is comparing the effect of both the fertilizers. And whenever we are comparing something, the other variable should not affect it. Only for that matter we are keeping all other factors or all other variables as constant. Okay, step 4 is formulation of null hypothesis on this research hypothesis. So we have to test the null hypothesis with the help of our data. Then we have to analyze our data and we have to check that the null hypothesis is accepted or rejected. Then what is the step number 5? Research study is carried out and data are collected. So here, in order to check the null hypothesis and research hypothesis, here we are testing only null hypothesis. So for that we have to conduct the research and then we have to collect the data. That is step number 5. The researcher conduct the study according to the research design and collects the data. What is the next step? Next step is step number 6, that is null hypothesis is tested. Here what is the null hypothesis? There is no significant difference between the organic and artificial fertilizers on the plant growth. What all data we are collecting? Maybe we are collecting the length of the plant in centimeters, width of the plant, number of branches, number of flowers produced. All these are the data collected from the experiment, and then we are using this data and we are analyzing that data statistically, and later on with the help of that statistical analysis we decide that we are going to accept this null hypothesis or reject null hypothesis. Seventh step is null hypothesis is rejected or accepted. On the basis of the statistical testing of the data, null hypothesis may be rejected. If the null hypothesis is rejected, what we will do? We will accept our research hypothesis. Otherwise, if the null hypothesis is accepted, already existing theory is confirmed. We are making the null hypothesis based on the already existing theory, isn't it? So that if null hypothesis we are accepting, that means the already existing theory is confirmed. If null hypothesis is rejected, researchers' research hypothesis will get accepted. That is the next step, that is step number 7. Then what is the last step? Step 8, that is communicate our feelings. Lastly, researcher can communicate her feelings or findings to the scientist or academic field or to the public. A written report helps others extend his result or use his findings in other areas. So that a written report on our studies that will help other researchers to continue their research or they can use it in their studies, whatever way it helps. And then next we will see the scope of scientific method in conducting educational research. Educational research is crucial to the overall advancement of different fields of study and learning as a whole. Data in educational research can be gathered through various ways, through survey method, through questionnaires, observation methods, or interviews. Interviews are different types, that is structured interviews, then semi-structured interview or unstructured interview. Observation also, that we can be the part of that, and or otherwise we can observe something from outside. So through various methods we can collect data in the educational field. Now let us see how this scientific method helps the educational research. First of all, first and foremost duty of scientific method is in order to reduce the bias or prejudice of the researcher. The scientific method attempt to minimize the influence of bias or prejudice in the experimenter. The best intentioned scientist or the experimenter cannot escape this sort of bias. But whenever we are doing our own problem to solve our own problems, such type of bias will not affect. But in the scientific community where the result have to be reviewed and duplicated, this type of bias must be avoided or at all cost. That is the job of scientific method. It provides an objective, standardized approach to conducting the experiment. So in this way, the scientific method avoid bias. Secondly, by using standardized approach in their investigation, scientists can feel confident. So this scientific method can give confidence to the researchers, because whenever they are stick to the facts and limits, the influence of personal or preconceived notions they can avoid. Even with such rigorous methodology in place, some scientists still make mistakes. Which type of mistake they make? They can fail to accurately account for errors such as measurement errors, or they can ignore data that does not support the hypothesis. That type of bias is known as confirmation bias. A famous scientist, Gregor Mendel, he is an Austrian priest, conducted experiment on pea plant on inheritance of various characteristics. There also he did a bias called confirmation bias. Here he collected all the data that is supporting his hypothesis and he discarded all the data that does not. Then most of the time this scientific method works really well. When a hypothesis or a group of related hypotheses have been confirmed through repeated experimental tests, it may become a theory. So that we know that the theory, once formulated, may change later on with the help of some experimental backup. Education is a social science subject. When we compare the research in the field of social science with that of other field, the error due to personal bias and prejudice are much more. In order to reduce this error into minimum, we can make use of the scientific method. Scientific method is a systematic method that we can use it in the field of educational research in order to reduce the bias and at the same time to increase the confidence of the researcher.